When she walked in, she stopped almost immediately. Gowns everywhere, silk, jewelry, champagne, and then there was her in jeans and a simple white top, the kind of outfit that instantly felt out of place in a room like this, and the room noticed. Heads turned as she walked further inside. The whispers started almost immediately. Who let her in? Another voice followed. Is she staff? Then came a soft laugh. She didn't get the memo, and just like that, the atmosphere shifted. Nia felt the pressure almost instantly, not because of anything directly said to her, but because the room already seemed to know exactly where she belonged. Her fingers tightened slightly at her side. Part of her wanted to leave before it became worse, before someone finally said it out loud. But she didn't move, because walking away would only prove them right. So she stayed, holding herself together in a room that seemed determined to pull her apart. And that was when she realized something. This wasn't an accident. It had been planned. She was supposed to feel this. The stares, the whispers, the difference between her and everyone else in the room. But what they hadn't planned for was Dominic Sterling, because instead of looking away, he walked straight toward her. And that was the moment everything changed. But it didn't begin there. It started days earlier. Nia sat at a long table finishing the final stitch. There were no assistants around her, just Nia and the dress. This wasn't just another design, it was personal. A birthday gift for the most important woman in Dominic Sterling's life. Era wants this perfect, someone whispered behind her. Of course she did. Men like Dominic Sterling didn't trust just anyone with something that mattered. A moment later, Era walked in, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Stop adjusting it, she said. It's already beautiful. Nia didn't respond. Ara looked at her for a moment before speaking again, almost casually. You're going to the Sterling mansion. Nia paused. That wasn't normal. To do what? Measurements, Ara replied. Then her gaze lingered slightly. And try not to look out of place. That was the real warning. Not about the dress, about her. Nia didn't argue or ask more questions. She simply nodded and returned to work. After finishing the final adjustments, she packed her tools carefully, took a slow breath, and headed out. The house didn't look lived in. It looked maintained. Perfect lawn, still air, and almost unsettling kind of quiet. The front door had barely closed behind Nia when the butler stepped forward. Right this way, he said, already turning. Nia followed him quietly through the mansion, past high ceilings, polished floors, walls that felt more like an art gallery than a home. Everything in that house seemed to have a place. Everything belonged. She was the only thing that felt out of place. The butler stopped at the entrance of a sunlit living room. Miss Nia has arrived, ma'am. Mrs. Sterling looked up from where she sat, and despite the quiet authority surrounding her, her smile softened everything. Nia, Mrs. Sterling said gently, I have been looking forward to meeting you. Come, let's begin. Nia relaxed slightly. This part came naturally to her. Tape measures, fabric notes, small adjustments. When she worked, the rest of the world seemed to disappear. She moved around Mrs. Sterling with calm focus and careful precision. And then the door opened. Heavy footsteps crossed the room before anyone looked up. Pushed the meeting to Thursday. No, don't ask them, just do it. His tone wasn't loud, but it didn't leave room for disagreement. He stopped near the entrance. I'll call you back. He didn't wait for a response, didn't even check if the call had ended. He simply lowered the phone and looked at Nia. Mrs. Sterling smiled, completely at ease. Dominic, she said. This is Nia. She's here for the fitting. He stepped closer. I thought would be the one coming. His tone was polite, charming even, but his attention never really left Nia. Nia straightened slightly, her professional instincts taking over. I'm sorry, she said quickly. She had a prior commitment, so she sent me instead. He nodded once, still watching her. His gaze moved to her hands, then the dress, then back to her again, like he was noticing something. You had a hand in this? He asked. Nia hesitated only briefly. I assisted, she replied. A faint smile touched his face. Of course you did, he said softly, because he knew she wasn't just there to measure fabric. She understood the design. Mrs. Sterling touched Nia's arm gently. You'll come to my birthday dinner. Nia blinked. Oh, I don't think It's not a request, Mrs. Sterling said with a soft smile. I'd like you there. Nia hesitated. This wasn't her world. And across the room, Dominic watched quietly, saying nothing but listening to everything. Before she could answer, another voice cut in. Is she really invited? Nia turned. A woman stood near the doorway, perfectly dressed and entirely unimpressed. Summer, Dominic's cousin. Her eyes moved over Nia slowly, openly judging her without saying another word. "We're keeping the guest list very selective this year," Summer added lightly. Mrs. Sterling didn't even look at her. "She's invited." That was the end of the discussion. For a brief moment, no one said anything. Then Summer smiled, not because she agreed, but because she had already thought of something else. She turned slightly, just enough to catch Dominic's attention. "Don't forget," she said casually, "Sophia is your date for the birthday dinner." Dominic didn't hesitate. "No," he said calmly, "she's not." And with that, he turned and walked out. Sophia wasn't just a name. She was Summer's best friend. Beautiful, polished, and perfectly suited for rooms like this. For months, Summer had been trying to place her exactly where she believed she belonged, next to Dominic. But Dominic had never confirmed it, never encouraged it, never promised anything. A flicker of irritation crossed Summer's face before she quietly followed him out. The room settled again, growing quiet, as if nothing significant had happened at all. Mrs. Sterling exhaled softly, like this was a situation she had seen many times before. "Pay no attention to them," she said gently. "Now, where were we?" Nia nodded and returned to work. To measures, notes, final adjustments. Her hands stayed steady even if her thoughts didn't. She finished the last measurements carefully and checked everything twice before stepping back. "That should be everything," she said. Mrs. Sterling smiled warmly. "Thank you, Nia." Nia gave a small nod. "Thank you for having me." Then she gathered her things, turned quietly, and walked out of a world she still felt she didn't belong in. The next morning, nothing looked different. But for Nia, everything had changed. Fabric moved carefully beneath her hands, precise and controlled, as if yesterday had never happened. Then the sound of heels approached. "Ara, how are the measurements?" she asked, setting her bag down. Nia didn't look up immediately. "Accurate," she said. "She prefers a softer structure around the waist, less rigid than the original cut." Ara paused. That adjustment hadn't been part of the original design. Nia continued, "I changed the fall slightly. It'll sit better when she moves." Ara studied her for a moment before nodding once. "Good." Nia finally looked up. "There's something else." Ara already disliked the tone in her voice. "Mrs. Sterling invited me to her birthday dinner." Ara's eyes lifted sharply. "Why would she invite you? You're my employee." Nia held her gaze calmly. "I didn't ask for it." Ara exhaled slowly. "I should have gone there myself," she muttered. "This wouldn't have happened." Then she stepped closer. "You'll go." Nia blinked slightly. "I thought I know what you thought." Ara interrupted. "But this is important." Her voice lowered quieter now. "You're representing my brand, not yourself." "My brand." "Keep it simple," she added. "Don't draw attention." Her eyes lingered on Nia just long enough to leave the message unspoken. "Don't forget your place." Nia nodded once. "I understand." At the mansion, sunlight filtered through perfectly trimmed hedges surrounding the garden terrace. Tea was poured quietly between them as Summer sat across from Sophia, calm and composed. "I met Ara's employee yesterday," Summer said, lifting her cup. "Aunt invited her to the birthday dinner." Sophia didn't react immediately. "Why?" Summer exhaled softly. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I didn't like it." She took another sip before continuing. "She doesn't belong in our world." She looked like she walked in from the street. Sophia's expression shifted slightly. "And your aunt thought that was appropriate." Summer gave a small, restrained smile. "She has a soft spot for potential." Sophia slowly set her cup down. "I don't understand," she said. "Why would she invite someone like that? She's just an employee." Summer leaned back slightly. "And Dominic noticed her." Sophia's eyes sharpened instantly. "How?" Summer didn't answer immediately. "The way he looked at her," she said at last, "like she mattered." Sophia shook her head once. "No, that's not possible." Then a faint smile touched her lips. "D is mine. He just doesn't know it yet." Summer smiled back, though the look in her eyes had grown colder. "Don't worry," she said softly. "I have a plan." Later that evening, Nia sat by the window with a book in her hand and coffee beside her. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She hesitated briefly before answering. "Hello?" A soft, polished voice greeted her effortlessly. "Hi, Nia. This is Summer." "Oh, hi. I hope I'm not disturbing you," Summer said lightly. "No, it's fine. I just wanted to check in about tomorrow night," she continued. "Mrs. Sterling mentioned you'd be joining us." Nia nodded to herself. Yes, good, Summer replied smoothly. We're actually doing something a little different this year. Nia frowned slightly. Different. It's her birthday, Summer explained gently, and she's always surrounded by expectations, gowns, formalities, all of that. So this time we thought we'd keep things relaxed. Nia listened carefully. Relaxed, she repeated. Very, Summer said. Just close family, a few friends, something simple. Then her voice lowered slightly. Honestly, it's more about her than appearances. That sounded reasonable. We're all dressing casually, Summer continued. Jean, white tops, nothing that takes attention away from her. Nia considered that for a moment. Okay, she said slowly. Thank you for letting me know. Of course, Summer replied warmly. Then came the final touch. We just didn't want you to feel out of place. See you tomorrow night. The call ended. Nia sat quietly for a moment before reaching toward her closet. The birthday dinner arrived, wrapped in soft golden light. Music drifted quietly through the mansion as luxury cars pulled in one after another. Doors opened, heels touched marble. Voices blended into soft laughter and polished greetings. Everything about the night felt elegant, refined, and perfectly controlled. Inside, gowns moved through the room like flowing silk. Jewelry caught the light. Champagne glasses clinked softly in practiced hands. Nothing felt loud. Nothing felt out of place. This was the kind of room where status was understood without anyone needing to say it aloud. And then Nia walked in. She stopped almost immediately. Her eyes moved slowly across the room, taking in the atmosphere, the expectations, and the level of wealth she hadn't been warned about. Then her gaze dropped instinctively to herself. Jeans, a white top, and suddenly it all made sense. This hadn't been a misunderstanding. It had been intentional. Heads turned around the room. Someone whispered just loud enough for her to hear. Did no one warn her? Another voice followed, colder this time. She actually came dressed like that. Soft laughter rose somewhere near the corner of the room, and Nia felt it immediately. The shift, the pressure, the way the space around her seemed to tighten without anyone even touching her. Her fingers curled slightly at her side as Summer's words replayed in her mind. We didn't want you to feel out of place. A lie carefully packaged in kindness. Part of her wanted to leave before the humiliation became worse, but she stayed, holding herself together in a room that had already decided who she was. And across the room, Summer watched everything unfold exactly as she had planned. Sophia stood beside her, flawless and carefully put together. She leaned closer to Summer. Is that her? Summer never looked away from Nia. Yes. Sophia's lips curved faintly. She actually came dressed like that. Summer only hummed softly in response. A moment later, the doors opened. Dominic entered beside his mother. Almost instantly, the room shifted again as guests began singing Happy Birthday to Mrs. Sterling. Attention moved toward her immediately, but Dominic noticed Nia first, and for a moment, nothing else seemed to hold his attention. Not the guests, not the celebration, not even the room itself, just her. His gaze locked onto Nia before he started walking toward her without hesitation. He didn't slow down, didn't second-guess it, and everyone noticed. Dominic stopped directly in front of her, close enough for it to mean something. You came? He said. Nia nodded slightly. Yes, I was told it would be. Relaxed, she admitted quietly. A faint shift crossed his expression. You were told wrong, he said. Then his voice softened slightly. You're all right. Don't overthink it. Nia exhaled under her breath. Easy for you to say. The faintest smile touched his face. Walk with me. Outside, the noise of the party faded behind them. Cool air moved gently through the terrace, and for the first time that night, Nia felt like she could finally breathe again. Dominic glanced at her. You look different, he said. Nia frowned slightly. Different. He nodded once. Smart, calm, kind. She looked away briefly. That's not usually what gets noticed in rooms like this. It should be, he replied. Then his attention shifted. That dress, he said. My mother's. Nia stilled slightly. It's beautiful, she nodded. I'm glad she liked it. Dominic looked directly at her. Did you design it? I assisted, she answered automatically, but Dominic shook his head slightly. No. She looked at him. I know you're the one who designed it, he said. You don't just assist work like that. Nia didn't answer. Not because she wanted to hide it, but because she didn't know what to say. "You're talented," he continued. "You should have your own name attached to something like that." Before she could respond, another voice interrupted. "Summer." She stood a few steps away, perfectly composed, though the sharpness in her eyes hadn't disappeared. "It's time," she said. "They're about to cut the cake." Her gaze moved between them before settling briefly on Dominic. "You should come inside." Dominic finally gave a small nod. Then he looked back at Nia. "We'll continue this later." Inside, the guests had gathered around Mrs. Sterling once again. Ara stepped forward first. "Happy birthday," she said warmly. "And please forgive the situation earlier. I don't know what possessed her to dress like that." Mrs. Sterling didn't even look at Ara. "I do," she replied calmly. "I know exactly who sabotaged her." Only then did she look directly at Ara. "You should be grateful to have someone so talented and kind working for you." Ara's smile remained in place, though only barely. She straightened subtly, trying to regain control of the moment. Candles flickered softly around the room as the atmosphere settled again. "Thank you all for coming," Mrs. Sterling said warmly. Then her eyes found Nia. "And a special thank you," she continued, "to the woman who made this evening even more special." "Nia." The room shifted instantly. "This is the first time I've worn something that truly feels like me," Mrs. Sterling said. "Comfortable, effortless, beautiful." Soft murmurs moved quietly through the crowd. Air stepped forward quickly. "Well, of course, the design." Mrs. Sterling gently cut her off. "It may carry your name," she said calmly, "but Nia brought it to life. You should be proud of her." R smiled, though the embarrassment beneath it was impossible to miss. As the tension eased, conversation slowly returned around the room. Drinks flowed again. Music resumed. Then Mrs. Sterling approached Nia personally. "You have a gift," she said. Nia swallowed softly. For the first time in years, Mrs. Sterling continued, "I felt like myself in something beautiful." Then she smiled gently. "I'd like to invest in that." Nia blinked in surprise. "What? Your talent?" Mrs. Sterling clarified. "If you ever decide to build something of your own, I'd like to be part of it." Nia's eyes filled slightly, not because of the offer itself, but because for the first time someone truly saw her. "Thank you," she said quietly. Mrs. Sterling smiled warmly. "No, dear," she replied softly. "Thank you." The moment settled quietly between them. Later that evening, as Nia prepared to leave, she stepped outside and took a slow breath of fresh air. Everything felt different now. Then she heard footsteps behind her. "Dominic, you're leaving." She nodded, still processing the night. "Can I take you to dinner sometime?" he asked. Nia looked at him carefully. Too much had happened tonight for her to think clearly. "Can we talk about it another time?" she asked softly. He held her gaze for a moment before nodding. "All right." Nia got into her car, closed the door quietly, and drove away into the night. The next morning, something had shifted inside Nia. She stood at her table with a blank sketch in front of her. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't thinking about what someone else would want. She was thinking about what she wanted to create, a moment. Later, footsteps approached. Ara walked into the studio, calm and perfectly composed. "You handled last night well," she said. Nia didn't answer immediately. "I wasn't trying to handle anything," she replied. "I just showed up." All studied her carefully. That's exactly why it worked. Then she stepped closer. "Opportunities like that don't come often," she said, "and they rarely come to people who stay in the background." Nia finally looked at her. "I wasn't invited because of an opportunity," she said calmly. "I was invited because of my work." R didn't deny it. Instead, her expression shifted slightly. "I'm expanding," she said, "and I'm willing to make space for you in a more visible way." A partnership. There it was. Not an apology, an offer. Nia held her gaze. "And my name?" she asked quietly. All smiled faintly. "That can be discussed." That was all the answer Nia needed. She nodded once before speaking calmly. "In that case, I've already emailed my resignation." Something flickered across Ara's expression. "This will be my last month working for you." Ara stared at her as if she expected hesitation or regret or second thoughts, but Nia simply gathered her things quietly before looking back at her one final. "I should get back to work." "I should get back to work," she said softly, like something between them had already ended, and before could say another word, Nia walked out, leaving silence behind her. By the time Nia stepped outside, Summer was already waiting for her. The moment Nia saw her, she already knew why she was there. "You embarrassed yourself last night," Summer said the moment Nia approached. "And you think I didn't know that?" Nia replied calmly. Summer stepped closer. "You didn't belong there," she said. "That world isn't for you." Nia held her gaze without reacting. Summer's voice lowered slightly, growing sharper. "My aunt sees potential in people," she said with a faint smile. "But eventually she'll see things clearly again." Then she tilted her head slightly. "And Dominic." Her smile deepened just enough. "He doesn't choose women like you. You were a moment, nothing more." Nia looked at her quietly, finally understanding who Summer really was. Then she gave a small nod. "Thank you," she said softly. The response caught Summer completely off guard. She blinked, and before she could recover, Nia walked past her. Summer stayed where she was, watching her leave while trying to understand why the conversation hadn't gone the way she expected. Her fingers tightened slowly around her bag. Later that evening, Nia stepped outside for a walk. A car pulled up nearby. Then Dominic stepped out. No suit this time, no polished presence commanding an entire room. Just him. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me," he admitted. Nia looked at him quietly. "I wasn't sure either." He nodded slightly. "I don't want to complicate things for you," he said, "but I would like to take you out sometime." Nia held his gaze. Everything from the night before was still sitting heavily in her mind. "I'm figuring things out," she said carefully. "I know." A quiet pause settled between them before Dominic smiled faintly. "Is this where I ask you out again?" Nia almost smiled. "You can try." "Tomorrow," he said. She looked at him for a moment before nodding once. "Tomorrow." "All right," he said softly. "I'll let you get back to your peaceful walk. See you tomorrow." He stepped back into his car, and moments later, the engine faded quietly into the distance. Nia remained there a little longer, standing beneath the quiet night air before exhaling slowly. Later that night, her door closed softly behind her. She walked past everything she used to cling to before stopping at her table. A fresh sketch waited on the table. Nia stood there quietly for a moment before picking up her pencil. Then she wrote her name in the corner of the page, slowly, carefully, like she was finally allowing herself to claim it. Nia. She looked at it quietly, and for the first time, she didn't question whether she deserved to put it there. For years, other people had worn her work while someone else received the credit. But now she will decide what comes next, and this time it would carry her name.